good morning, Shannon. Probably good afternoon where you are now. And welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, happy International Women's Day to
Woo!
all the women here and to all the women in the lives of all the men who are attending. So, and happy Holi to people who are attending from India. Wanted to introduce Shannon Gath here. Shannon is, what can I say about her? Top 50 most powerful women in tech as awarded by the National Diversity Council, twice finalist for the Boston CIO Awards, rising star by the Healthcare Business Women's Association, and on and on and on. But Shannon, if I may give you the platform right here to introduce yourself, and we can go from there. Welcome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you for the warm welcome and happy International Women's Day. It's fantastic to be here. What a great way for all of us to celebrate such an awesome occasion. So thrilled to be here. I think Sangeeta and I connected on our shared passion and energy around these kind of topics. So really thrilled to be here. I am currently the CIO at Teradyne. We are both a robotics company, but also in the semi industry. And I've been here for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in April. But if you ask my 10-year-old self, hey, Shannon, what do you want to be when you grow up? My answer was, I either want to be an aerospace engineer or, no lie, a plumber. I was the kid that was sitting underneath the sink with my head under there with my dad fixing it with wrenches and, legs sticking out. And it really was, math and science really, was near and dear to my heart. It came more naturally to me than some of the language arts. I think that's just how I'm hardwired. And really, I think that's just a reflection of my own nature, which is about problem solving. I really find fulfillment in problem solving. So I studied at Tufts University, just north of Boston, and I studied mechanical engineering. Again, it was math and science that I really loved, physics in particular, and that's where I found my energy. And at the time, it was, I think there were maybe 2 other women I could even remember in my graduating class. So I was very used to an environment where there just weren't a lot of women. I think I've led a life where I like to surprise people sometimes, things that you wouldn't expect, whether it's mechanical engineering or driving a motorcycle or playing rugby was, my sport in college. So I've sort of had that sort of natural inclination on how I've led my life. And my first job out of college was mechanical engineering oriented. And I was, trying to design viscometers for the US Navy. And as a part of it, it was in a startup company. So I had to wear a lot of hats. And one of the things they asked me to do is implement an MRP system. And I said, well, okay, I don't know anything about it whatsoever, but I am resourceful and I like to make sure that, what I do has a great level of qualities. But I don't know anything. So here I am trying to be very curious. That is that part of who I am. I'm just naturally curious. I'm like, well, I'm trying to implement this system, but I'm talking to this developer and they don't even speak the same language as me. I'm like, I don't know what they're speaking English, but it just doesn't even make sense to me. So I went out and I actually trained myself as a developer so I could have intelligent conversations with how do we do this together. And then I did that. I figured, oh, I'm good now. And then I realized, oh, there's a DBA or a database administrator. They have a different language. So I went out and actually trained myself as a DBA. So, after that and implementing that system, I just fell in love with technology and I spent the rest of my career in IT. And I was really intentional about my career. I really wanted to try different things to figure out what I liked best. So I was in a startup, a small company, a medium company, and a large company, all very intentionally. And then I also made sure that I was in multiple industries. So in industries that had some synergies with each other. So it wasn't like a whole new environment, but I was in, pharmaceuticals and high tech and pharmaceuticals, high tech, and financial services. But what those industries all have in common was, a lot of them are heavily regulated. They're just different regulations, but IT has to solve those challenges, but also meet the compliance needs in those organizations. So I've really spent most of my career trying these different environments, figuring out truly where I personally thrive, what type of environments I thrive in, and then looked for where that next opportunity is that really aligns with what I like to do, what I find fulfilling, and where I have a shared passion with the organization. So that's really brought me here.
That's great. So you did mention that you were in all these different companies, right? Like there's healthcare, and then there's technology, and then there's financial services. And at least looking from the outside, they all seem so different. And even looking at technology, right? Like technology companies probably are on the cutting edge of technology. Financial services companies, or even healthcare, they're probably way more careful, right? They want it to be like proven and everything before they get into it. So when you were working at these, I'm sure you had very different experiences at each. Was there anything in particular that you thought, I would, these are the practices I like, or I don't like, and that's why I want to change? Or was it that you just wanted to have a different experience? Like, how did you navigate yourself in these completely different realms, so to say?
Yeah, I would say it's certainly different environment to environment. What I found a level of connection with. I can tell you that I have never taken a position where I felt like it wasn't a good fit. So, and I think now today, where there's such a tailwind in helping women, have more roles in more companies, we have more choices and more opportunity to be able to say, hey, listen, I really find healthcare as very fulfilling. And, for me, I've been in a couple of pharmaceutical companies. It's really easy to get out of bed every morning when you're like, hey, I am helping somebody with cystic fibrosis that used to not live past 32 have a full life. Like that to me is super easy to get, but it's very different. In financial services, it's kind of getting behind a mission where you're helping people to save money to create the lives they've always wanted to lead. They're so different. And even Teradyne, Teradyne is sort of grounded in the things I love, mechanical engineering and all that stuff, tinkering with everything. But it's also a place where if you look at the numbers of women, one of the things that drew me to the company was they only had 17% women across the workforce. I have spent my whole career on the side, really investing in diversity, equity, and inclusion, understanding the problem itself and how we can, kind of break through some of these barriers. So I felt like I brought a lot of experience where, I almost call it like an impact opportunity where there's a huge organizational need and desire to get better. Like it is one of the top priorities of Teradyne to really get better representation of minorities and really creating this, inclusive environment for people to thrive in. So I was like, oh, it's almost like I felt there was some sort of calling for me to come to Teradyne where all of those things lined up. But for me, it's been very different. The one thing I will say is I have been very laser focused, and I know not everyone's like this, and it might just be part of who I am. But very early in my career, I was probably in my 20s, and I was like, you know what? I want to be CIO. I want to be CIO by the time I'm 40. And I missed it by a couple of years, but I got there. But knowing where I'm trying to get to helped me make the decisions along the way and take risks where, there was a time in my career, it was probably one of the hardest career decisions I had, where I loved everything I did in that role. It was like a dream come true role, but I knew getting to CIO would be a lot harder in that role. And there was an opportunity that came up on the side that said, hey, we need you, what you have. And that's what we're looking for. And it was a very faster path to CIO. So I took it, despite being so happy. It's really hard to give that up with so much unknown on the other side. But when you have sort of that clear vision of like, here's where I'm trying to get to, taking those leaps, really can serve you well. And those things have worked for me.
That's great. So you really have to get out of your comfort zone. I have so many questions here with everything that you said, right? So I'm going to start right at the beginning where you were saying that, you had tried all of these different industries. I find very often, especially, the business I am in, I will see this very often that when women are applying for a position, they're looking at the job description and they don't want to take that leap unless they figure out that they are at least a 85% match, let's say. Whereas very often with men, you will see that they're like, oh, I'm matched 50%. I'm perfect for this job, right?
Yep.
How do we change this for women to feel more confident in themselves? Because, look at you. You went through all these different industries, you stepped out of your comfort zone. You are confident in yourself. I'm not sure that's how you were born, right? We are not all just born that way, right? We kind of learn. Age helps, experience helps.
Yep.
But when you are not quite there yet, how do you tell someone, wait a second, you know what you're capable of, and you can pick this up? And that's pretty much all you need. You need the smarts and a willingness to do it. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, I think just having the conversation around that research. I mean, that research happened a while ago around the fact that, women would wait till they could check off every qualification, right? I think the more we're talking about this in more forums, I think the more awareness women have, and they'll check themselves, wait a minute, I can throw my hat in. And if you look around you and you see your male colleagues doing it, I think it helps build your confidence to be able to do things like that. So I hope just educating people on that circumstance, that it's been historically a behavior that has happened. I think the more women are going to have the confidence to be able to take these roles. But for me, aside from that education piece, because I think that education piece is not only going to give the women the confidence to take a leap like that, but it's also going to educate the management team, whether they're men or women, to say, hey, maybe you, Sangeeta, should take this role over here. And I know you might be thinking that you only have this, but I see your potential. And honestly, we're all athletes, right? No one knows everything on day one. I know we talk about imposter syndrome and everything like that, but at the end of the day, you have to make yourself an athlete, and whatever is key in that space, and where you have blind spots, educate yourself. You're talking about passion, you're talking about drive. Anytime I'm in a new situation, I got to go educate myself, and that's going to make you successful. And as long as you look behind you and you're like, I haven't really fallen down yet in any of these big leaps, the more confident you're like, I can do this, why not? And I think if you're building the right support network around yourself, even when you fall down, and we all fall down, you got a bunch of people there to pick you up and keep you going. And it really is important to, build that support network, men, women, everybody.
I love that. I love that. Yes, that is so true. I think that support network is so important. So I love that you brought up that point. Now, speaking of checking off boxes, and something else that you had said earlier, you cannot make better what you are not measuring. Mm-hmm. When companies are hiring women now, and we're getting more women into the executive roles, sometimes I feel like a lot of companies are just checking off the boxes, mm-hmm. right? Because they're like, oh my gosh, this is the trend now. We got to show that we have we are empowering women, right? Right. So in your experience, have you actually found, concrete reasons where it has made a big difference, and even in the bottom line of companies, right? Where if they are being inclusive, if they're including diverse opinions, if they are getting more women and people of diverse backgrounds in the boardrooms, how do you see that changing, where companies are going, not just, what the perception is of the company to the world, but to their bottom line?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. And it's interesting because, like I mentioned, coming to Teradyne, it's understanding the lack of representation of women here. as a challenge. And there's just, what's fascinating to me as an engineer is there's no simple answer. It is such a complicated problem that it really takes everybody sort of rolling up their sleeves, myself included, to say, what's going on in this instance? Like what, and it's really thinking through multiple channels. So, I try to look at recruitment. What are the challenges and the barriers that are, and it's different company to company. So, are we having women on the interview panels? Like if we're, women are interviewing and not seeing anyone that looks like them or have any similarities to them, are they going to want to come? So I think you have to go through and understand the journey of candidates to understand the recruitment concerns or barriers, and then work as a team to go after those most important things. And then you got to do the same on the retainment. And you have to use data. I'm talking to Intelliswift. You guys are kings of this. Understand, you have to look at the data and be like, are we losing more women than men? Are we doing exit interviews? What are we getting out of that insight? And figuring out like what is specific to the challenge in that space, and then also advancement. Are we promoting people for the wrong reasons? Are we looking past some women that maybe are very collaborative, but maybe we're promoting people that are very dominant in the conversation, which is not the leadership style that you want. So it's really looking in a mirror as an organization and figuring out the exact barriers using data to really break through that. And I can share at Teradyne, one of the things that we did is, I worked with our head of HR, who's awesome. Her name's Mahal. And her and I were just having a conversation one time. We were like, we got to figure out this problem. And what if we brought all the women together at headquarters? Informally, we had a brown bag lunch, and we just very candidly had a conversation of like, what's getting in your way? What are the unique challenges? And hearing very directly, taking the time to really listen, like, what's getting in your way? How can we help? I mean, we heard things like that we just never even knew. The mother's room was not like comfortable, or people didn't really want to go there. We had somebody in facilities in the room right now. We fixed that. And we did. We changed the mother's room. So and I think one of the things that I heard from women is because we tend to be very logical and data oriented in decision making, when the numbers of women are much smaller, they feel like their voice isn't heard. So understanding that challenge and then creating an environment where their voice is heard and there's action behind it, I think that's power. And Teradyne's been phenomenal at finding investing in ways to bring out what's really getting in the way and taking action on it.
So I have to say, what I admire about you, Shannon, is that you have actually stepped out of your comfort zone in order to, get to your goals, right? But not just that, what you mentioned just about Teradyne, like one of the reasons you went to Teradyne was because there were only 17% women. So your active goal in your mind was, how do I bring Teradyne up to where women are heard? I mean, I think we really need more women, and maybe even men, and other people like you, where you go in and that you make that a career objective. I think that's one of the really, really important things for everybody to have at the back of your mind. Yes, I have a career goal. Yes, I want to advance my career, but I also want to advance the careers of the ones that are underrepresented. And I think that's wonderful. Kudos to you for that. But since you mentioned your brown bag lunch, I have to bring up one point, because
I have to brace myself.
It has been on my mind. I mean, so you are like this Michelle Pfeiffer lookalike, right? And you coming up through the whole career chain, and working around in companies that were like, you were a mechanical engineer. You probably studied in a classroom where there were barely any girls, right? And then you get into an industry that's tech and tech oriented. I am sure you were the minority. And looking like you look, I am sure there were so many biases. I can tell you, just for me, I am 5'9", and 5'9" is really tall for an Indian woman. And I remember when I was doing my undergraduate in engineering, people would say, uh, why are you not like an air hostess? Because that was like the model akin career to be in if you were tall. And
Yeah.
so it would be like, what do you mean? Like it never even crossed my mind because I wanted to be an engineer, right? So small things like that, but even otherwise, I'm sure you had situations that were uncomfortable. How did you and how did you navigate them? Because, we got to know.
Well, it's interesting. So, there is research that actually shows different things that have historically been more promotable. So level of attractiveness is one thing, where people actually make like 12% more money if they have a certain level of attractiveness, which is interesting. Tall people, like you mentioned, tend to be promoted more. So it's very interesting. And I think what diversity, equity, and inclusion is trying to do is level the playing field and be like, well, that's silly. Why would someone get promoted just because they're tall? But being aware of those biases. So say, what profile of people should be promoted? Somebody collaborative, somebody open-minded, somebody with a lot of initiative, taking initiative. So I think changing how we think about decisions about advancement and making sure that we're being fair across, the entire workforce, I think is really important. It's just very interesting, having seen how the world has changed in my career. So, I've had a corporate career for over 25 years. And, what it used to be like when I first got out of school versus what it's like now is night and day different. And it's such a positive momentum in the right direction that I know I have a 13-year-old daughter that will never have to face the things I had to see back in the day. And I think about things like the Me Too movement and Time's Up movement. These have changed the world. And in terms of, some of the biggest offenders of things like sexual harassment and other things happen to be the executives up at the top that could get away with anything. And what the world finally did was like, you know what, you can't get away with it. I don't care if we're the most successful company in the world and your CEO, you're gone. And you hear about it in the news all the time. So I think it's helped to level the playing field a lot in terms of, women don't have to deal with that as much in the office anymore. So I do think that has changed a lot. I remember being back in the day, and if I had to think twice about going out to dinner with a male, superior or anything like that, I don't know what people were going to think. I would rather just not do it or give myself the opportunity that another male colleague could easily go and create a bond and a trust relationship that might lead to promotion. I don't worry about that stuff like I used to. It really has changed a lot. And, kudos to the executive teams across the globe for really just no tolerance anymore, taking action and showing you just can't get away with that anymore. So it really has created a safer environment. I mean, it's not perfect for sure, but way better than it ever was. And that to me, like when you think about International Women's Day and what it means to me is, we're just celebrating this together with the men and women on this call. Like it's just such an improvement of where it was 25 years ago. And it's something we should all be proud of because we've all been part of it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, things were definitely different even 10 years ago, forget 25, right? And so like you said, night and day. So tell us a little bit about the night, because even now, as much as, things are changing, there are some areas where things haven't changed that much. There are some countries where things haven't changed that much. So have you been in situations and have you had tips on how to navigate these situations?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been in situations. I think it's a lot easier to speak up now than it used to be 25 years ago. And I think what I observed 25 years ago is if a woman spoke up, they disappeared. And you're like, yes. Okay, well, if I'm in that circumstance, I'm not sure I want to raise my hand. It's very different now. Now I think women feel very safe and secure, and companies have stood by women that have been brave and courageous enough to raise their hand. I also think there's a much stronger women's network to help people bring out that. And then there's also people that just have a better awareness, both men and women, that call out bad behavior when they see it. so that they know they have allies in the room that are looking out for them, and that people that tend to have a lot of power in an organization can't get away with that. And I've seen that. Now, I'll give you one example. There was a woman that I only barely knew at the company, but she worked for this individual that was sort of an office bully. We were in a conversation because something went sideways, something went terribly wrong. And we're like, everybody get in the war room, let's go figure this out. And then we start the meeting and go, this is the problem we're trying to solve. And she starts to lean in and say, well, this is what happened. And then her own boss cut her off and said, well, wait, I'll take this. And he starts going on. I go, excuse me. She is the closest to this. She is the most knowledgeable. I want to hear what she has to say. And then she continued, and everyone agreed with exactly her recommendation, and we moved on. And I didn't think twice about it. And then after 5 o'clock, she comes to my office, and I honestly didn't know her. And she came in and she goes, hey, Shannon, I just wanted to say thank you for giving me air, letting me have a voice, because I am like always just like bombarded by that individual. And it's the first time someone stuck up for me. And she broke down in tears. Now, I didn't even think twice about it. Like after, I didn't even like connect the dots of how much that meant to her. And the sad part was a week later, she gave her notice and she left. And I think the more leaders understand that you guys have respect, right, as one of your core values. Right. Like the Absolutely. More you demonstrate, like you have to be respectful. There's no tolerance. Otherwise, the more women are going to be more comfortable and they'll stay, right? And we need them.
So I know we are getting towards the end of this, but I have a couple of real quick questions for you. So you mentioned, that this is one of the investments that you make, with getting women to places where they should be. What would you do to elevate women to the top leadership roles, say? So there's one thing about getting women comfortable in their skin and where they are and, in their career, but that little push to get to the top leadership roles, because that's a high rung to climb. What would you do?
So I can give you a really good example at Teradyne. Like I said, they're so supportive in making this better, that, myself and 2 other sponsors were asked to think about the idea of mentorship and sponsorship. And it almost has like a bad taste in my mouth, like because I have been in formal mentoring programs. I've had a kind of sort of informal sponsor, through the years. I didn't like any of them. I really didn't find them useful. And I know that sounds awful, but it was like you'd get paired with a mentor. And if it wasn't a good fit, you're like, oh, this is torture. I'm not really getting anything out of it. It's a waste of my time. But we said, okay, let us figure this out. So we did some internal research, asking internal leaders what they thought. Then we did some external research, and we listened to companies that were really leading the charge in DEI. And one of them, and I'll give them, full credit, is State Street, which is here in the Boston area, and fantastic at really supporting women and helping them thrive. And we went through sort of the stuff that they do in terms of mentorship and sponsorship, and like a light bulb went off. And it was this concept they do called mentoring circles. And what it does is it pairs 2 mentors with 4 or 5 women that are of like place in their career, and they have a shared desire around a certain competency. Let's call it strategic thinking or, executive presence or whatever that reason is. So they have a good reason to come together. And we modeled a pilot program here at Teradyne. And what we did is we targeted where specifically we found a lot of women like dropping off in numbers to the next level in the corporate hierarchy. And we said, okay, let's help get more women through that to the next level of advancement. And, we invited them into this program. We're just finishing it up. We're about in our 6th month now, but it's very targeted at helping women grow where they want to grow, and opening up the lines of communication with executive partners like myself and other leaders at Teradyne, who now will have a really strong connection. They have more visibility to us, and we can help, pull them through a little bit more effectively in the organization. So far, so good. I'll keep you posted on how that goes. But if anyone ever wants to hear more about the work that we've done, I'm happy to share it with Intelliswift.
Oh, I am definitely going to get in touch with you after this about that. I definitely want to hear more. That sounds wonderful.
Just one last point though, that around that concept is that First of all, you have the ability to have two different mentors. So if one's not a great fit, maybe the other one, you have a better chance the other one is. But more importantly, what I liked about it is these women are working together, almost as a project team. And even after the program ends, you've created this natural support network that you can take with you for the rest of your career. That doesn't go away. So you've kind of helped in a few different ways to really support these women and help advance them.
That's great. So I am just going to make a quick announcement here. If you guys have any questions, guys, gals, on this call here today, please send them out. But I'm going to ask you one last question while people send in their questions.
Yeah.
How do you navigate the different dynamics in the executive room?
Yeah. I think the way I handle it is I have my own leadership style that has worked well for me. So I'm happy to share what that is conceptually. So for me, it's really showing up as an objective leader. And I think that really builds trust with people. And I can tell you in my role at CIO, I have to stand up, investment governance groups, right? It has everybody on edge because everyone wants the funding to do what they want to do, but there's only so much funding. So I usually have to put in place sort of investment governance, which people don't always want to do. So if you're in a place where that's the case and you're the squeaky wheel and you're used to getting all your funding and now someone's going to make you go through an actual process, they're like, no way. But I've been told, like, I can use one example where I was called in front of the CEO and everybody else to, Shannon's first on the agenda and we're going to talk about investment governance. So I'm like, clearly someone's upset with what I've done. So instead of, I'm walking in there in front of the firing squad, but I'll tell you my approach because I think it might be something you guys can use in your day-to-day lives. I walked in there with a single slide and, the way I spoke about investment governance was in 5 ways. And I basically said, hey, the objective of having governance is to make really good decisions. And if the payoff, right, so you got your objective, no one can deny that, your payoff, if we do this right for like every dollar we have to spend on technology as a company, we put it in the next possible best place as a company. And then I talk about what's working well, like, you know what, everyone's engaged, no one misses this meeting because everybody wants their funding. But then I also talk about what are people complaining about, what's not working, and own it. And, I'll say, okay, well, the people that are coming are very selfish and they're functionally focused and not enterprise focused. And then yes. I say, okay, what am I doing about it? Well, I'm working with the CEO to see whether or not we have the right people in the governance group. So what I mentioned, it's really being objective around things that tend to be controversial. What's the objective? What's the payoff? If you do it right, what's working, give credit where credit's due, what's not working, and taking accountability. What am I doing about it? And that usually earns the credibility and respect of the other leaders at the table. And that has worked well for me.
That's great. Great. So there are some questions. I'm going to start with the first one here. What are some skills management should be looking for that are not on a resume? Things you've noticed in top talent, maybe.
First and foremost, the one that just pops to my mind is grit. I'll never be the most intelligent in the room, but I can go toe to toe with most people on grit. I think it comes from, I have 2 amazing parents who their work ethic puts me to shame. But just having even 10% of what they have, being passionate the way I am and not afraid to roll up my sleeves and dive in, I think that has helped me be successful. That's what I see in other people. That's what I look for in other people. Show me someone that's willing to just do what's needed to be done for the betterment of the company. And those are the athletes I want, because I know they're going to help in one space and I'm going to put them over here and give them a different opportunity so they can help drive positive change somewhere else. That to me is number 1.
That's great. Wonderful. What was one of the most shocking but actionable things that you have heard from the brown bag lunch that you implemented? I know you mentioned about the mother's room. Anything else?
Let's see. Well, so the mother's room is probably the most obvious to me. we've done sessions on work-life integration is a big one. So it's funny. So the first time we did a Teradyne Table Talk event, we said, okay, everybody just talk about the things that are top of mind to you, like what's getting in your way. And it was things like work-life integration, negotiation was a big one for people. What do you do when you're the only woman in the room came up? And then, how do you make sure your voice is heard? So for me, it's great that we fixed the mother's room and got it to a really, it's cute. It's got blankets, it's got kid pictures, and it's awesome. We really listened. But what I think is more powerful is we gave them a place to have a voice, because that's just the start of many changes to come, where we just gain a better understanding as what is going to help these women thrive, because they're so important to our success.
Right. Great. Sounds great. Here's another one. Do you feel you've always had the confidence to be successful, or is confidence something you've had to personally develop through time to get to these achievements?
Great question.
Yes, that's Susie for you.
I think I have a lot of grit, like I said, and grit will get you pretty far. I don't think confidence is this thing that you just wake up with every day, and it depends on what you're doing. I chose to learn how to ride a motorcycle. Some days I was confident, some days after, I've done some dumb things on it, you're dropping. So I think it's about picking yourself up and carrying forward. And I think the more experiences you have that are positive around getting back up and doing it again and getting it right, really builds your confidence overall. I would say, I'm getting into my late 40s. I'm more confident than I've ever been, because first of all, I don't really care about a lot of things that I probably used to care, because I am focused, like what matters to me. My family matters to me. My job matters to me. Helping women matters to me. As long as those things are in a good place, I really don't care about the small stuff.
I am so impressed. I have to tell you a secret. So one of my side gigs is that I teach spin, a group exercise class. I teach spin in the gym, and I absolutely love doing that. That's how I get my workout. But the secret here is I actually do not know how to ride a bike. Spin is great because the bike goes nowhere, and it's not like I never learned. I did ride a bike when I was a child, and you know how they say you never forget. Well, you do. And I am too scared to get on a bike now because I don't want to fall down and break bones and be out of commission for 8 weeks, right? So you learn to ride a motorcycle. Oh my gosh. You're making
not well, by the way, not well.
But you're making me rethink going on a bicycle and maybe actually riding a bicycle. I just might do that now. So there's one more question. You mentioned earlier in your brown bag lunch, somebody asked, what happens, if you're the only woman in the room, how do you navigate that? How do you?
That's a good question too. At this stage in my career, I don't think about it that often. And it's often that I'm the only female in the room. But I think that comes with the confidence you gain over the years too. But I also, we do have a lot of tailwinds where the support women get from men at this point. So when you are the only female in the room, is grown so much. There's such a better appreciation for what women face in the workplace by men that, I find I have a lot more allies in the men that I work with every day. And, I've been in difficult situations by some of the people you least expect it, where, I come in, I take over a new team. Somebody that was going for that job was not happy about it. He was disrespectful to me in a meeting. And it was one of my business partners that, hey, you didn't answer her question. Stop the whole room. Said you didn't. And I'm like, it's very rare for me to be on the side of being defended for, because I don't mind defending myself. And I was blown away. And I think the more you experience that kind of, positive energy in the room, people with really good intention and truly care about a supportive environment, I don't worry about it as much. And I do think showing up as your authentic self in these meetings, you bring a unique perspective. People should want to hear it. And make sure, like, I know you guys, it's all about respect and Intelliswift is you deserve respect, and if you're not getting it, stand up for yourself, because you have the backing of your entire management team to get that respect.
Great. So we have a couple more questions. I'm going to try and get them all in. I know we are at the end of everything, but one of the questions that we have, and this is the wonderful thing of having men on this forum also, it's what can men do differently or better to help women co-workers do better personally and professionally?
I think they just got to listen, and seek out specifically, like, what's getting in your way. And no different than what I'm doing with these Teradyne table talks is I'm trying to hear directly what's getting in the way of these women that are so intelligent, such high potential, like what's getting in your way so I can go remove it, like dig in, like really try to understand. And if you're sitting there thinking, it's no different for men than women, you're wrong and you need to be better educated. So, if you really want to be supportive, it's taking the time, the energy to understand what's getting, because it's different every place. And you really have to take the initiative to figure it out.
Right. Another question. So you joined Teradyne before the pandemic, right?
So I was in the pandemic, so I joined remote in it, which was a very interesting journey to join remotely in all my onboarding meetings. There are pros and cons to it for sure, but yeah, it's the first time in my career I've joined remotely.
That's actually that was actually the question. What did you have a challenge, not just onboarding, but like with management? The role you are in. It's an executive suite role. It is one of the most important things for any company. And I think your headquarters, where are your headquarters located?
We're just north of Boston in North Reading, Massachusetts. Yep.
Yeah. So at least your headquarters were in the same time zone. But did you have challenges being that you were in the pandemic and you were managing everything remotely?
I would say genuinely, it felt like a little bit of a warm hug when I joined Teradyne. And I mean that, like, when I say it's a priority around diversity, equity, inclusion, when they hire people like me into these roles, they want us to be successful. And they are so attuned to the fact, how do I help this individual? It's obviously a challenge to join remotely where you don't have as much sort of breaking of the bread together informally and stuff like that I think people went out of their way to really make sure that I acclimated myself to the environment really well. And I can tell you, I mean, I had times where I ran into a wall a couple of times, like, hey, president of this division, do you have like 10 minutes for me? He's like, dropping everything. I'll get on a call. Let's go. So what I mean, I think when the executive team really prioritizes diversity, equity, inclusion, you see it in their actions. And I do feel like Teradyne in particular is such a supportive environment for women because they really want to be more diverse in a more diverse state.
That's great. So I'm going to end with this last question from Kristen. International Women's Day today, what does it mean to you?
So for me, I think, it is all about reflection and, going from my start of my career to standing here with all of you, to me, it's something that we all should really celebrate. I mean, the fact that we have men and women on this call that appreciate the challenges that we have, we're looking for the answers, that people are asking, the level of engagement on this call. I mean, I'm so blown away by it. It really touches me to know that so many people care about making things better. And the more we educate each other, the more we share. Like, my career is a lot longer than some of you on the call. So for me to share where I fell down and what worked for me so that you don't have to face that same problem, you don't have to walk into that pitfall, the more women we can rise up more quickly, so we get the numbers we need at the top, because they're not there yet, and they're gonna be, and it takes investment and passion that you guys all have, because I know passion is also one of your core values, and I see it right on your face, Geeta. That's what it's going to take.
That's great. Now, I really wanted to end it here, but there is a really fun question here
Oh, let's
from an
hear it.
avid motorcyclist. Okay, so let's go for it. They say, similar to corporate motorcycling, which is more focused on men, and it takes immense strength and guts to be a female motorcyclist.
Yeah.
It is truly inspirational. Would you mind sharing what your corporate motorcycle is and what is the corporate motorcycle that you ride?
Meaning, tell me more about that. Meaning, like, what helps drive me in my career right now?
What are your, I think what they mean is, what are your greatest challenges as a woman in the situation that you are in now, CIO of a company that is, I know you're using your mechanical engineering skills. I know there is, a bit of the health background that you bring to it. So how are you navigating the challenges of a executive role at a company that probably, until you came, had only 17% women?
Right. I mean, challenges, I think, in terms of my CIO role, I think that's more in the macroeconomics of the world and, making sure that we, grow and succeed as a company. I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges. But in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I want to be able to pull up so many more women up. And, I got two hands, so it's going to take all of us kind of joining hands together and really, really just sort of lifting up one another. And, there's just so much work to be done to get to the right numbers. I think it's like 53% of the workforce are women, and that's not the state. I think there's like 8% women are CEOs and only 1% I think are women of color. Like, there's so much to be done there. It's just, how fast can we get there? That to me is the challenge. How do we accelerate that process?
Thank you. And I think you're doing such a great job, because even just coming on a forum like this and educating all of us and giving us a glimpse into how you have done things is so helpful, because it invigorates all of us, to that same goal. How do we make things better for everybody? So I really thank you. I love to see the passion you're bringing to this. And I will definitely get in touch with you after, because I want to learn more about, how you have implemented this at Teradyne, and hopefully learn from it and make things better here and in other places. So thank you. Congratulations on all your awards, and a very, very happy International Women's Day to you and all the women in your lives. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your leadership and your passion. One team, one dream, right, everybody?
Yes. Join hands.